There is a moment in every relationship where something invisible begins to shift. It's not something you say out loud, and it's not even something he consciously notices at first. But deep inside, in the place where his fears and desires live quietly, something wakes up. That moment is when he feels, not thinks, not guesses, but feels that he might lose you, and that feeling changes everything. You see, we as women are often conditioned to believe that if we love deeply, give fully, stay available, stay present, nurture constantly, we will be chosen, adored, and never left. But what if I told you that this narrative, so familiar, so normalized, is not only exhausting your spirit, but blocking the very energy that makes a man value you deeply? Louise Hay taught us that everything we experience externally is a mirror of what we believe internally. If you are chasing his affection, trying to prove your worth, anxiously wondering where you stand, it is not because he has power over your heart. It's because, on some level, you've forgotten yours. When you shift your energy from fear to self-love, from anxiety to assurance, from proving your worth to knowing your worth, the dynamic between you and him begins to transform. He no longer feels he has you in his pocket. He no longer assumes your presence is a guarantee. And this isn't about manipulation. This is about energetic truth. Men sense when you are living for their validation instead of your own expansion. And here's what happens when that changes. When he feels, perhaps for the first time, that you are grounded in your own light, when he senses you no longer need his love to feel full, when your attention pulls inward and he realizes that you are no longer reaching for his crumbs, that is when he begins to wake up. He begins to feel the presence of your absence. And that presence is loud. It echoes in places within him he doesn't even know how to name. Men are taught to chase mystery, but they fall in love with presence. Not the kind that clings, but the kind that glows. And your glow comes not from trying harder, but from loving yourself deeper. You don't have to pretend, you don't have to play games, but you do have to remember your value. Louise Hay always reminded us that our thoughts are incredibly powerful, and what we focus on, we invite more of into our lives. So if your mind is focused on keeping him, fixing him, figuring him out, then you are feeding the fear of loss, and he can feel it. He may not be able to explain it, but he feels it in his bones, and it makes him feel safe, too safe. And sometimes that kind of comfort turns into complacency. But when you bring your attention back to you, to your healing, your joy, your energy, your path, he notices. Not in the way you hope, not with fireworks or grand gestures at first, but in small ways. He texts more. He watches your stories and lingers. He wants to know where you are, what you're doing. He feels curious again. He feels inspired again. He feels like something might be slipping through his fingers, and that something is you. This isn't about making him fear. It's about letting him feel. Because many men do not truly understand what they have until the energy that once constantly reached for them begins to redirect inward. That inward shift is magnetic. It's feminine power in motion. It's soft but fierce. It's calm but unstoppable. And here's the truth. The moment he feels he might lose you, he stops taking you for granted. But that moment doesn't come when you say, "I'm done," or when you threaten to walk away, or when you cry in desperation. It comes when you actually start choosing yourself, consistently, quietly, peacefully. It comes when you no longer need his love to feel loved. You are not here to beg for someone to recognize your light. You are here to shine it so brightly that only those who are aligned with it can step into your world. He may not notice at first. He may even pull back. That's okay. You keep choosing you. Keep loving yourself out loud. Keep showing up for your joy, because that shift, that sacred turning inward, it's what brings everything into balance. Louise used to say, "You have been criticizing yourself for years and it hasn't worked. Try approving of yourself and see what happens." Try it. Just try loving yourself like you used to love him. What would change? Your tone, your posture, your energy in a room, the way your eyes no longer search his for clues of your worth. And that's when he starts to wonder, where did you go? Because he can still see you. You're still there. But the version of you that once lived to love him, she's no longer the same. And that, my love, is what makes him feel he might lose you. He feels the shift not in your words, but in your frequency. Not in your distance, but in your calm. And that frequency, that quiet knowing, is more powerful than any ultimatum ever could be. There's a sacred kind of silence that surrounds a woman who no longer seeks to convince. She no longer tries to explain why she's worthy. She no longer justifies her needs, her desires, or her presence. And that silence, it says everything. Without a word, it speaks to the man in front of her, and it touches something ancient in his soul. The awareness that this woman, once completely accessible, is now in a place he must rise to reach. When he feels he might lose you, it's not always panic that strikes first. Sometimes it's a strange, soft confusion. He doesn't know why your voice sounds a little different, why your energy isn't stretching toward him like it used to. And even if your actions haven't changed dramatically, the intention behind them has. And that intention is everything. A woman connected to herself becomes unpredictable, not because she's playing games, but because she is no longer governed by someone else's validation. Her joy is self-generated. Her glow is internal. Her magnetism is born from inner peace, not outer praise. And here's something beautiful Louise Hay helped us see. When you heal the parts of you that once felt desperate to be chosen, you stop attracting the kinds of people who only come close when they sense you slipping away. Instead, you begin to draw in those who value your wholeness, not your wounds. But when he's still in your life, still in your orbit, and he senses you slipping into your power, he feels both fear and awe. And the awe part is what often brings him closer. Not because you made him feel small, but because your expansion reveals how much more there is to discover in you. You stop being a destination. You become a journey. There is something incredibly powerful about not reacting, about not chasing, not over-explaining, not seeking to be understood. When he sends a message and you don't drop everything, when he changes plans and you don't crumble, when he tests your boundaries and you don't budge. These moments are tiny windows into the world of your self-respect, and he sees it, even if he doesn't know how to process it yet. Men remember the women who made them feel alive, not because of how much they gave, but because of how deeply they embodied themselves. And when he starts feeling like he might lose you, he begins to remember who he is in your presence. He begins to miss the mirror you once held up to him, showing him the man he could be. And if he is meant for your journey, this realization invites him to meet you where you now stand. But if he isn't, something even more powerful happens. Your clarity begins to repel what no longer aligns. This is not a loss. It is a clearing. It's easy to believe that silence means distance, or that presence means attachment. But you can be present and still untethered. You can be loving and still unattached. You can be open and still selective. These are not contradictions. They are sacred harmonies of feminine strength. Louise often spoke about affirmations as tools to reprogram the inner dialogue. So imagine waking up tomorrow and telling yourself, "I am worthy of a love that rises to meet me." Or, "I am safe to choose myself, even if it means someone else walks away." These words are not just phrases. They are energetic invitations to the universe to realign your relationships, your reality, and your own self-connection. And when you embody these affirmations, when they are no longer words you say, but truths you live, he begins to feel the shift. You are no longer the woman who fears the silence. You are the woman who finds strength in it. And that strength, it's rare. It's unforgettable. You don't have to pull away with anger. You don't have to create distance with resentment. You simply begin to center yourself so deeply that the outer world, including him, adjusts around your core. When he feels he might lose you, it's often because you've finally found yourself. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a peaceful, anchored, undeniable way. You no longer wait for his approval. You approve of yourself. You no longer seek his promise. You make promises to your own spirit. And that level of sovereignty is irresistibly magnetic. And if he is capable of growth, he will rise, not just to hold on to you, but to evolve beside you. This is not about power. This is about alignment. When you are no longer consumed with being kept, you become free. Free to love without fear, to stay without self-sacrifice, to walk away without collapse. And that freedom is the beginning of true connection, one that does not imprison either of you but liberates both. That's what changes everything. There is a quiet revolution that happens inside a woman who no longer feels the need to convince anyone of her worth. She doesn't chase. She doesn't plead. She doesn't perform. She simply is. And when he begins to feel he might lose you, it's often not because you've disappeared, it's because you're finally fully present within yourself. He notices the difference, not in dramatic changes, but in the calm detachment you now carry. It's in the way your laughter feels lighter, not because of him, but because you're no longer carrying the weight of proving your love. It's in the way your silence doesn't beg, it breathes, it holds space, and that space becomes a mirror he cannot ignore. Louise Hay often said, "The point of power is always in the present moment." When you reclaim your power, you no longer dwell in what he did or didn't do. You no longer anxiously anticipate the future of the relationship. You anchor yourself in now, in this moment, in this breath. And that grounded energy is transformative. When a man senses that you are no longer emotionally leaning on him, but standing beside him, whole, clear, radiant, it disrupts the dynamic. Not because you're creating tension, but because the old patterns no longer hold. He may test it, he may resist it, but deep down he knows something has shifted. What changes isn't just your behavior, it's your essence. You are not reacting from fear anymore. You're responding from clarity. And clarity is powerful. It's not aggressive, it's not defensive, it's simply unshakable. And in that space, his energy either rises to meet you or it retreats. But you are no longer available for halfway love, not because you're harsh, but because you're healed. He might remember how he once felt needed, how your world used to orbit around him, and now it doesn't. Now you have your own orbit and it's magnetic, not because you're unavailable, but because you're selective, and that difference makes all the difference. Sometimes when he feels he might lose you, his first instinct is to pull you back the only way he knows. Through charm, through promises, through nostalgia. But this version of you no longer lives in the past. She lives in her truth. And unless his actions align with that truth, they no longer move you. You're not cold, you're clear. And clarity doesn't beg, it invites. He may feel confused by your softness that no longer bends, by your sweetness that no longer shrinks. But this is who you are now. A woman in her power. A woman who knows that loving someone doesn't mean losing herself. When he feels that shift, he begins to ask himself questions. The right questions. Questions like, what am I doing to keep this connection alive? What do I bring to her life besides presence? Have I grown enough to walk beside the woman she's becoming? And if those questions stir something real in him, he will meet the moment. If not, he may distance himself. And even that will no longer break you, because the woman you've become no longer fears the absence of others. She honors the presence of herself. That's what truly changes everything. It's easy to assume that the turning point in a relationship comes through confrontation or crisis. But often, the real shift begins quietly, when you stop chasing clarity from him and start embodying clarity within yourself. That moment, subtle but profound, is what he begins to feel, even before he understands it. When he senses that your attention has returned home, to your own heart, your own joy, your own peace, he begins to wonder where the emotional tether went, the one that used to anchor him in your orbit. And the truth is, you didn't cut the cord. You simply let it fall, naturally, gently. because it no longer served your evolution. Louise Hay often reminded us, "I do not fix problems, I fix my thinking, then problems fix themselves." You stop trying to fix the relationship, or him, or the dynamic. Instead, you heal the inner belief that you needed to be chosen in order to feel whole. And when that belief is dissolved, the way you love transforms. Now, your love is not a transaction, it's not a plea, it's a gift, given freely, but never at your own expense. He feels the change in the way you respond. There's no longer urgency in your voice. No more trying to hold it together with forced positivity or over-effort. Instead, you respond with presence, with grace, with discernment. You've become the kind of woman who no longer needs to hold on to what's not holding her with equal strength. And that presence is confronting, because it makes him realize how much of your energy he took for granted, how much of your softness he assumed would always be there. Now, he sees you tending to your own garden, watering your spirit, rooting into your purpose. And it unsettles him, not because you're doing anything to him, but because you've stopped doing everything for him. This doesn't mean you've closed your heart. On the contrary, your heart is more open than ever. But now it's open with boundaries. It welcomes love, but only the kind that feels nourishing, aligned, safe. And unless he's ready to show up in that way, he will start to feel like he's losing you, not because you're gone, but because you've evolved. Your presence becomes rare, and what is rare becomes precious. And maybe for the first time, he realizes you are not replaceable. Not because of your looks or the way you made him feel, but because of the way your energy awakened parts of him that he had forgotten. You made him feel seen, safe, inspired. And now he's left wondering whether he's done the same for you. That wondering is what shifts him from passive to present. But even then, you're not waiting. You're not pausing your growth to see if he'll catch up. You're moving forward, with or without him, not out of bitterness but out of deep respect for your own path. You've outgrown the space where you used to shrink to keep the peace. Now you expand, and if he can't expand with you, he feels the distance more than ever. That is the paradox. When you stop fearing the loss, he starts fearing it, but not in a shallow way. It's not about ego, it's about essence. He begins to miss the version of himself that only came alive in your light. He remembers who he was when you loved him. And if he's conscious enough, that memory becomes motivation. Not to win you back, but to become worthy of walking beside you again. And if he does rise, it won't be out of pressure. It'll be because your growth reminded him of his own potential. But if he doesn't, you've already chosen yourself. You've already crossed the bridge from needing to be loved to being love. That shift is irreversible, and that's what truly changes everything. There's a moment, often invisible to the outside world, when a woman no longer fears being misunderstood, when she no longer feels the need to defend her heart or explain her shift. That moment marks the beginning of her emotional liberation. And when he senses that this change isn't temporary, but foundational, he begins to feel something he didn't expect, uncertainty about his place in your life. You see, he had grown comfortable with who you used to be, the you that adjusted, that compromised, that waited. But this new you, the one who honors her own timing, who listens more to her intuition than to outside opinions, is unfamiliar. And for many men, unfamiliarity is unsettling, especially when it comes from a woman they thought they knew. But the truth is, he never really knew this version of you. The woman who holds her gaze steady, the woman who no longer apologizes for taking up space, the woman who sees relationships not as her salvation, but as her reflection. When he feels he might lose you, it's often not about the surface details. It's about the subtle shifts in power, in emotional availability, in vibration. He feels you rising, and he wonders if he still fits into the life you're building. He questions if his presence adds value to the woman you're becoming, or if he's slowly fading into a version of the past that no longer holds weight. And yet, this isn't about him. It's about you. Louise Hay taught us that the relationship we have with ourselves determines the quality of every relationship around us. So when you begin to speak to yourself with more kindness, when you choose your own peace over someone else's comfort, you start to rearrange your entire emotional landscape. You set new standards, not because you're hard to please, but because you're finally easy to love. For yourself. And that love radiates. It glows through your words, your choices, your silences. You no longer beg for energy. You attract it. You no longer overextend. You receive. And what he used to take for granted now appears as a gift he's unsure he can still access. That tension becomes a turning point. Some men crumble under it. They retreat. Confuse your clarity for coldness, your self-respect for distance. But others rise. They see that what you require now is not more effort, but more authenticity. They understand that the only way to truly keep you is not to possess you, but to meet you, fully, honestly, vulnerably. And even then, you are not waiting. Because this chapter of your life isn't about proving your worth to anyone. It's about embodying it. It's about becoming so rooted in your truth that love becomes a celebration, not a negotiation. He feels this. And it either terrifies him or transforms him, sometimes both. But the most powerful thing is that your energy no longer depends on his reaction. Whether he stays or leaves, evolves or resists, you remain aligned. You remain soft but self-assured, open but protected, giving but discerning. This is what changes everything. Not because you walked away, but because you finally walked toward yourself. And from that place, you no longer attract connections born out of fear, scarcity, or loneliness. You attract from wholeness. And that kind of love, if and when it comes, is never based on fear of losing you. It's rooted in the joy of choosing you every day. That's the difference. That's the shift. That's the power. There's something profoundly beautiful about the journey back to yourself. It's not loud. It's not flashy. It's not something the world will always understand. But you feel it. In your breath, in your boundaries, in your presence. And when he feels he might lose you, it's because that journey has made you radiant in a new way. You are no longer defined by whether someone stays. You are defined by how deeply you stay true to yourself. This isn't about revenge. It's not about control. It's about liberation. The kind of freedom that comes when you stop fearing what might end and start embracing what is beginning within you. You don't have to force anything to happen. You don't have to beg anyone to see you. You just keep returning to yourself, again and again, with compassion, with patience, with unwavering self-love. And from that place, everything that aligns will meet you. Everything that doesn't will gently fall away. He might feel the distance. He might feel the shift. And yes, he might change because of it. But more importantly, you have changed, and that is everything. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to breathe it in, carry it with you, and most importantly, share it. Because somewhere, another woman is questioning her worth. Somewhere, someone you know is on the edge of choosing herself. And your voice, your comment, your presence could be the exact light she needs. So let's grow this message. Let's fill this space with healing power and truth. Like, comment, subscribe. Share your story. Tell me, what part of this touched your heart the most? I read every message with love, and together we are building something sacred. Thank you for being here, for being you, for returning to your truth. Now go and keep choosing yourself. The world feels that energy, and so does he.